culture and abnormality. So keep in mind, guys, if you want to, yeah, at least they won't argue. Well, it is a thing there. We don't even know if they're hearing me. They might argue. That's the thing about catatonia. Now, if anybody else wants to discuss another topic, we can bring up something. We can. Otherwise, I'll continue on with abnormal psychology because honestly, I'm having fun with this and I enjoy this. And hopefully, you guys are picking up something and learning and everything. And if you have questions about the particular thing, interject. I'll answer as best I can or give you my take on it, and we'll go from there. So, just as we must consider changing societal values and expectations and defining abnormality, so too must we consider the differences across cultures. In fact, this is explicitly acknowledged within the DSM-5 definition of disorder. Within a given culture, many shared beliefs and behaviors exist that are widely accepted and may constitute one or more customary practices. For instance, many people in Christian countries believe the number 13 is unlucky. The origins of this may be linked to the Last Supper, at which 13 people were present. Many of us try to be especially cautious on Friday the 13th. Some hotels and apartment buildings avoid having a 13th floor altogether. Similarly, there's frequently no bed number 13 in hospital. The Japanese, in contrast, are not worried about the number 13. Rather, they attempt to avoid the number 4. This is because the sound of the word 4 is similar to the sound of the word for death. There is also considerable variation in the way different cultures describe psychological distress. For example, there is no word for depressed in the language of certain Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, and Southeast Asian cultures. Of course, this does not mean members from such cultural groups do not experience clinically significant depression. As the accompanying case illustrates, however, the way some disorders present themselves may depend on culturally sanctioned ways of articulating distress. So here we go. So there's a case study as depression as a Native American elder. So here's the thing, right? Let's say we no longer have the word depression, right? It's no longer there. But we still are feeling the symptoms of depression. How might we express that? You might say, for example, well, I feel a profound sadness. I feel a loss of interest. A lack of joy. Something like that. Maybe I feel tired all the time because I don't have the motivation to get out of bed. It's hard to reverse engineer that back if you remove the term. Because again, the classification system is very useful. Very useful. So here we have JGH is a 71-year-old member of a southwestern Indian tribe who has been brought to a local Indian Health Service hospital by one of his granddaughters and is seen in a general medical outpatient clinic for multiple complaints. Mr. GH's complaints involve non-localized pain. When asked to point where it hurts, indicates his chest, then his abdomen, his knees, and finally moves to his hands all over. Barely whispering, he mentions a phrase in native language that translates to whole body sickness. His granddaughter notes he's not been himself lately. Specifically, Mr. GH, during the past 3 or 4 months, has stopped attending or participating in many events previously important to him and central to his role as a large extended family and clan. He's reluctant to discuss the change in his behavior as well as his feelings. When questioned more directly, Mr. GH acknowledged that he has had difficulty falling asleep, sleeps intermittently through the night, and almost always awakens at dawn's first light. He admits that he has not been felt like eating in recent months, but denies weight loss. Although his clothes hang loosely in many folds. Trouble concentrating and remembering are eventually disclosed as well. Asked why he has not participated in family and clan events in the several months, Mr. GH described himself as too tired and full of pain and afraid of disappointing people. Further pressing, the clinician is met with silence. Suddenly, the patient states, my sheep haven't been doing well lately. Their coats are ragged, they're thinner, they just wander aimlessly. Even the ewes don't seem to care about the little ones. The Sami have a culture of not talking about pains and suffering because they believe speaking it makes it. That's interesting. That is an interesting concept. And one, if I was a clinician treating someone of the Sami, I would have to keep that in mind in order to create effective treatment. Or overcome that particular cultural barrier in another fashion. That's a really good introduction. Interjection, Jocko. Extra credit for you. I don't know what it gets. I think all the points make no sense, and are worth nothing. But extra credit for you. Physical examination and laboratory tests are normal. Mr. GH continues to take 2 tablets of acetaminophen daily for mild arthritic pain. And although he describes himself as a recovering alcoholic, Mr. GH reports not having consumed alcohol during the last 23 years. He denies any prior episodes of depression or other psychiatric problem. Consider this. The attitudes towards health and illness are very much influenced by culture and ethnicity. How do these factors play a role in your own family? Is there a tendency to be fatalistic about illness or to minimize pain and symptoms? Or do people in your family tend to be very reactive to medical and emotional issues and worry about health a lot? So here's a question. I'll answer that. You guys can answer that if you want to. I'll answer for myself if people don't want to share personal stuff, because obviously you don't want to overshare. Fine. People in my family tend to care a lot about medical issues. Mental issues are a little sore spot, but because I've had suicidal ideation, both of my parents are at least more open to the idea of this being a real thing. I almost died on the operating table, so they are very clear with physical symptoms. They're, broken arm, they understand. Asthma attack, understand. But it's the mental health that they're starting to get on board with, to varying degrees. I love both of my parents, but, everybody's a product of their time and their upbringing and their experiences and choices. So, as is apparent in the case of JGH, culture can shape the clinical presentation of disorders like depression, which are present across cultures in the world. In China, for instance, individuals with depression frequently focus on physical concerns, fatigue, dizziness, headaches, rather than verbalizing feelings of melancholy or hopelessness. The focus on physical pain rather than the emotional pain is also noteworthy in Mr. GH's cases. Despite progressively increasing cultural awareness, we still know relatively little concerning cultural interpretations and expression of abnormal psychology. The vast majority of psychiatric literature originates from Euro-American countries, which will color how things are perceived, because Euro-American culture, or Euro-American academia, produces papers with a certain cultural slant or norms taken for granted. That is Western Europe, North America, Australia, New Zealand. To exacerbate this underrepresentation, research published in languages other than English tends to be disregarded. Now, that being said, that can be worked on. As note, prejudice towards people with mental illnesses seem to be found worldwide. However, some types of psychopathology appear to be highly cultural specific. They are found in only certain areas of the world and seem to be linked to culturally bound concerns. A case in point is Taijin Kofusho. This syndrome, which is an anxiety disorder, quite prevalent in Japan. It involves a marked fear that one's body parts, or body functions may offend, embarrass, or otherwise make others feel uncomfortable. Often, people with this disorder are afraid of blushing or upsetting others by their gaze, facial expressions, or body odor. Another culturally rooted expression is found in people of Latino descent, especially those in Caribbean. It is ataque de nervios, or an attack of nerves. It's a clinical syndrome that does not seem to correspond with any specific diagnosis within the DSM. The symptoms of an attaque de nervios, which is often triggered by a stressful event such as divorce or bereavement, include crying, trembling, and uncontrollable screaming. There's also a sense of being out of control. Sometimes a person may become physically or verbally aggressive. Alternately, a person may faint or experience a seizure-like fit. Once the attack is over, the person may promptly resume his or her normal manner with little or no memory of the incident. So, question to the stream: does anybody here have a culturally, have knowledge of a culturally specific condition that may fall outside of Euro-American academia? I honestly can't think of anything at the moment for myself. Otherwise, I would list an option. But if someone has one, please share with the class, and we'll put it on the board. That's fun. I like doing that. I want to do that again. As previously mentioned, abnormal behavior is behavior that deviates from the norms of society in which a person lives in. Experiences such as hearing the voice of the dead relative might be regarded as normative in one culture. Example, many Native American tribes, yet abnormal in another cultural milieu. Nonetheless, certain unconventional actions and behaviors are almost universally considered to be the proof of a mental disorder. And I would agree. If I started saying that I was hearing the voice of my dead grandfather or dead grandmother, people might think, Nim, you're under a lot of stress. You should probably relax a little bit. Maybe talk to somebody about that. Or they may ask, well, what's the voice telling you to do? Does my grandfather? Probably to study more. My grandfather was very big on academics. Now, here we are. Many years ago, anthropologist Jane Murphy studied abnormal behavior in the Yoruba of Africa and the Yupik-speaking Eskimos living on an island in the Bering Sea. Both societies had words used to denote abnormality or craziness. In addition, the clusters of behaviors that were considered to reflect abnormality in these cultures were behaviors that most of us would regard as abnormal. These included hearing voices, laughing at nothing, defecating in public, drinking urine, wow, extreme, and believing that things that no one else believed. Why do you think these behaviors are universally considered to be abnormal? That's a good question. Why, I would say probably as for the drinking urine, most people, if it comes out of you, like, if it's a waste product, it comes out of you, we know that there's nothing, no nutritional value and probably doesn't taste good. But I guess that's a subjective thing. I'll have to ask somebody who's been involved with that. I've never been involved with that. But hearing voices in general, hearing things that aren't there, laughing at nothing, again, could be a thing, and believing things that no one else believes. Conspiratorial thinking, perhaps. Maybe it's so far out of the life that people live in that believing something else could be a problem. Well, again, it's an idea.